after pulling out of the semiconductor joint venture with Vedanta, Taiwanese electronics manufacturing giant Foxconn says it is working to apply separately for setting up a semiconductor manufacturing unit in India. It said that it's reviewing the landscape for the optimal partners for the project. The development follows, remember, Foxconn's announcement of exit from a semiconductor joint venture with Vedanta, a $19.5 billion joint venture, as the venture struggled to get a technology partner to make semiconductor chips in India. Many are calling it a blow to the semiconductor mission, the plans that India has. But remember, the government has come out, clarified that this is not likely to be a blow. In fact, Vedanta and Foxconn, even if they're moving in their separate directions, will continue to venture out to find a tech partner and perhaps set up a semiconductor fab. We are discussing that, of course. Big story. Anjana Menon, who's the CEO of Content Pixies and also a columnist, joining us at this point. Anjana, I want to understand from you, what are going to be the immediate ramifications of this GV breaking down?
Well, this isn't the first time that India's tried to push aggressively into semiconductors. It has happened before. We've been at it, I think, since 2013 or even way before that, trying to bring semiconductors in. Obviously, it focuses the attention on India's, desire to gain some kind of geopolitical currency because it wants to get into semiconductor manufacturing so aggressively, and it's willing to incentivize companies here. It is a pushback to that effort because it's not like you can set up a chip factory or a foundry overnight and suddenly you gain a foothold in the so-called chip manufacturing global table. So it is a setback for what is likely to be its sort of segue into having a larger place in the geopolitical sphere.
Right. And Anjana, you mentioned that it's not easy to set up a fab, and we've discussed this before here on News9. It takes years and years, approximately 4 to 8 years after you've started setting up to finally give an output that merits distribution and can go through quality checks. It is in fact a very long drawn process.
Well, there are lots of issues with wafer fabs, which is why the world is kind of divided between Taiwan, which makes 90% of the chips in the world, America, which is trying to take that dominance away, and China, which has its eye on Taiwan because it's looking at chip security. It's also an extremely water-intensive industry, and I've written about this a couple of months ago when the plans were first announced. We are now the most populous country in the world, and water is an issue for us because we've only got probably 4% of freshwater resources of the world. To just put it in perspective for the lay reader, I'm sure a lay viewer, a lot of us have ROs at home for purifying water. And so when you switch on your RO machine, a lot of the water that comes out is wasted water because it's extracted and wasted the water, and it's given you a smaller quantity of drinking water. Wafer fab needs ultra pure water, which means that the amount of water wastage is huge. Taiwan's success in part has partly or mostly really been because it gets a huge supply of water from typhoons and the monsoon. And so its reservoirs are always full, and it's managed to keep its dominance because of that. And the years that they've had a drought, they have slipped back. They have failed to supply chips to the world. So I think for India, there is a greater balance that it needs to look at, which is between securing what you could call chip security versus looking at the environment and the needs of the most populous, country in the world, and water being such an essential component.
Right. Interestingly, you also mentioned in that article that you were referring to that India must reconsider whether it can afford to be a chip-making hub or is better off seeking strategic alliance that we are seeking. We have Micron, Rakesh, expressing interest in India, and we've got a huge market for chips in India. But what we need right now, as many would say, is chip-making facility. It sets us back.
Obviously, it sets us back. I think the government of India, in its true style, has articulated a proactive line of defense. but one has to cut through that and see that there is a challenge. And even with this joint venture happening, the tech partner was missing. That's where they fell apart. So, Anjana, my old colleague, has rightly articulated, water as a critical issue. And that is a challenge, I think, that will apply to new projects also if they are in areas where there is water shortage. For instance, Gujarat may not be that well endowed. She'll correct me on that if that's the right place. So there is a geographical play for all such projects. And the second is the tech partner. There's a lot of intent. Government of India has been articulating that very strongly, that we have so many levels of interest. Ashwini Vaishnav has gone on record. Rajiv Chandrasekhar has gone on record. US and India have gone into a strategic huddle on this particular very, very strategically important area. But weaning away investors from Taiwan to India, and with China keeping an eye on both, is not going to be easy. It's easier said than done. I would agree with Anjana. But Anjana, you tell me, going forward, what kind of a recipe would you lay out for us to really reimagine the semiconductor space, where we have inherent and investor interest at the policy level? We have invested a large amount of money to invest. Here is a government which is throwing so much, good money probably at a venture that hasn't taken off yet.
Well, the government hasn't really put money in on the ground yet. And I think part of the reason was what I read was that the government was questioning the blueprint and the capital layout for these firms. But what probably the government should look at is to have a secure pipeline of supply, which is a strategic securing of that supply. For example, we're not an oil surplus country, but we are importing a lot of our oil. So can you be somewhere in that pipeline? For example, can your engineers be the ones designing the chipset? So you have skin in the game, and hence you also have access to the supply. So I think my stance would be to say the goal should be to secure chip supplies more than insisting that all the chips that we put into our machines, or 90% of the chips, have to be made somewhere in a wafer fab in India. That is probably a tall ask, and I think China is already struggling with that. The US has come into play well after Taiwan. So it's a good ambition to have, but there are practical difficulties with it.
Absolutely. Practical difficulties that we're dealing at the moment. A tough ask. Technology that is possessed by China, and the raw material, technology possessed by the US, and the raw material that China is now hoping that it can hold on to and put sanctions there. So of course, war on chips, as we say, is heating up. Chips that are essentially used in every part of electronics that we use today, from a mobile phone to your cars and your laptops. Everything is powered by chips. Chips, as they say, could be the new oil. So
suddenly chips have become like the most important part in our lives. And from the business to business perspective, business to consumer perspective, and business to government perspective, all of them are playing at the same time. I do believe that, so long as the Government of India is committed to see this as a hugely strategically important area, solutions will come back. This is an initial setback. The good news is that Foxconn remains committed to, being together with India. There are challenges with Vedanta as a partner as well. It's a great company. It has a diversified portfolio. But in the last couple of years, it hadn't the best of the run. So in that sense, getting into a new area and making a great success of it instantly is possibly a bit of a challenge that the joint venture couldn't take off.
Absolutely. And the joint venture, of course, couldn't take the challenge. They've now parted ways, Foxconn and Vedanta. It may set us back, but remember, they were both seeking technology partner. They will independently now continue to seek technology partner. As they say, chips is the new oil, and we can only see war on a global level, a soft war sort of heating up, more and more players trying to grab their hands at whatever they can as far as chip making facilities is concerned. India is also not holding back. We have, of course, rolled out a giant semiconductor mission action plan, hoping to get fab set up in India extremely very, very soon. Anjana, appreciate you taking time out and joining us on that big story.
Rakesh, good to have you, Anjana. Thank you with us. Let's have more of you in the shows going forward.
Absolutely. We look forward to having Anjana and Rakesh. Thanks very much for joining.